roofing structures, roofing makeup, build-up.
In terms of flat roof and pitch roof?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Separate the two.
Shall we go cold roof, warm roof then, okay? Right. A flat roof makeup. Look how many pens I've got. I'm going to get all of my pens out. So I should have one of them things, shouldn't I? Right. Flat roof first. I'm going to draw these as a solid wall. Right? So this is on section. Yeah? These are the walls. With a flat roof, you have the flat roof joists. Yeah? But
can you label that, and then I'm going to take a picture of it at the end.
Flat, with my spelling, roof, joist, yeah? And then we've got these we're going to just put as walls, yeah? Generic.
Yeah.
Solid walls. I'll put solid walls. They would normally be cavity depending on what you're building. With every roof, you need some kind of water runoff. When people say flat roofs, they're not actually properly flat. Sometimes they puddle because of the roof finish, but they're not flat. What I would also say is everything is normally built to an angle or straight and upright. You don't normally lay stuff at an angle. So if you've got a builder that's laying this joist at an angle without any good reason, they're doing it wrong, normally. What happens is then, you've got the flat roof joist, the walls, and then you have what they call a furring. Kind of over-exaggerated. Furring. Which is an angled piece of timber which allows the water to run off. Now, this is the difference between kind of a cold roof and a warm roof. If you've got the space and the height, and there's a lot of regulations in London that don't allow you to have the height, if you've got the height, you would then, there's various vapor control barriers. Maybe I'll do that's another pen. Another pen.
I'm not sure you can hold that
Look at me. I'm going to get confused in a minute.
Pen fingers.
You have like a ply membrane, and sometimes, depending on where the designers put it, there's a vapor control barrier. But then, the true difference between a warm roof and a cold roof is that you have a warm roof, insulation's here. Yeah? Warm roof, insulation. This is a warm roof. And then you have another ply, and then you have whatever roof finish. So let's say it's a felt roof finish.
And can it be any roof finish?
Yeah, you have to double check with the angles. So that might only be a 5-degree angle. If you was to want tiles on it, you couldn't, it's unlikely you'd get a tile to lay at that angle, because the way that water runs off, it could run in and under. Capitulation? I think that's not right. Yes, we'll think of it in a minute. You can have a rubber, you can have felt, you can have, I think there are some other modular systems, metal. You have to check the manufacturer's details, but they can lay at these kind of 5-degree angles, say. Let's say it's a 5-degree angle. Yeah? It's a warm roof because normally, oh yeah, look, I'm going to change these to cavity now. Cavity walls. Because what you're trying to do, essentially, is create a lovely warm envelope, insulation in here, a lovely warm envelope for those people living inside. Now, the issue is with this, is you end up with a kind of a bit of a rubbish detail here and here, where you essentially kind of stuff insulation in, because what you don't want, you want kind of this warm element here to connect with this warm element here. So, and then I won't go into it, but then there's kind of, you wrap around, there's fascia details, etc. That might be into a building or something like that, right? But that is a warm roof because actually everything's warm.
What would determine then if you had a warm roof or a cold roof?
It's a different way of construction. So when I first started my career, a lot of it was cold roofs because you needed kind of ventilation over the top. The technology and the insulation wasn't really there to create a warm roof, but somebody's kind of invented this system. And this tends to be kind of the norm now when it comes to flat roofs. Reasonably easy, effective to construct. Now, a cold roof, one of the reasons to still use a cold roof is to crunch down the height. So if you imagine...
You've got a restriction, you kind of look at it more as a cold.
Yes. But what then happens is, so let's say, still the same construction, because you still need a flat roof with a fur in, but let's say you've got a height restriction and your flat roof actually has to go here. Yeah? So this is a cold roof. Look at me trying. I've got a blanket now. A little blanket. Cold roof, yeah? You end up with a situation where this can't be quite as stuffed as much. Insulation levels are a bit harder to obtain, especially with kind of current regulations. So you end up with insulation here, but you need a flow of ventilation.
Is that on top of the joist?
That's in between the flat roof joists.
In between them?
Yeah, in between, and in actual fact, I finished that, and under. So what you've got is it reduces the ceiling height in here, yeah? Reduces the ceiling height. You have to then have kind of ventilation eaves over, so the air flows over. Otherwise, you end up with a situation. If that is tight against there, you end up with condensation, and you often see that in old buildings when pictures or furniture is pushed up against the walls. Hot room, lack of airflow, black mold condensation. And it happens, you'll see it often in old roofs. If you've got an old unventilated roof and somebody's pushed a load of insulation in there, you'll often get kind of black, and it retains the moisture. So that's the reason you have ventilation over the top. It reduces the head height, but also the benefit is it reduces this here. So it's a reduce. Now,
so if you were going to struggle with planning,
yes, a cold roof might be the option. You can. There are hybrid systems which I won't go into, but there is products on the market which can form a warm roof, but have the height and have the ceiling height, but it's a kind of more expensive product, and you've got to think about it. So the program, you've got to think about how you put, like when you order this stuff. The reason being is that we've now got, so that's a reduced head height. So that's reduced.
So as a client, you wouldn't necessarily notice the difference in warmth to your building?
No, very good question. And no, because actually the regulations still have to be the same. What's happened in recent years is because, let's say this is a 150 joist, you might actually only be able to get 100 mil insulation in between because you need a 50 mil airflow over the top of it. But in order to make regulation, you might need another 150 or 200 here in order to make up the kind of heat loss. So absolutely great question. No, you wouldn't, but your designer should really be leading this. And this is where the problem comes when you've got maybe a design and build or a building control on a notice, is that somebody might have drawn a very brief kind of, here's my extension, here's some doors, here's my kitchen, Mr. Builder, build it. But if you're in a situation where you've got restricted head heights or actually kind of planning conditions around heights, you might find that you've got a reduced ceiling height without you knowing, because what you haven't got is anybody to actually design it before you start on site. Go on.
Can I just ask about the ventilation eaves?
Yes.
Is that just a space up there that allows airflow?
Yeah, you'll see it quite often. We haven't got any examples around here, but you'll see it quite often where there's a little kind of, looks like just like little slots in the ridge. Sometimes you actually have them like circular things plugged in the face of the fascia, or a mixture of the two.
So like the ones we're installing at one of our projects.
Yes, yeah, exactly. There is an alternative to this. So you can, but like I said, it needs a more thinking about, and a project manager or project or builder that understands this better. Is you can, in certain circumstances, let me get rid of that. You can, in certain circumstances, go back to a warm roof and replace this furring with insulation. Yeah? Stuff this corner. I know that Bowder do a system like that.
And is that encased in a frame?
No.
The structure?
No. It is a tapered structure that you normally end up with a ply layer here and maybe a ply layer here, depending on what there's, and vapor control barriers, like I've said, maybe a vapor control barrier here this time. Slightly different, but kind of the same theory. Stops condensation. The reason this doesn't always work, and the reason it's a longer lead time, is because you need to prove to building control that that room still feels, going back to your question, as warm as a warm roof. Because if you imagine here, heat loss, you could, I don't know, let's call it no heat loss through there. It won't be because there's always heat loss. But let's say there's no heat loss through there because it's quite thick. Yeah? Here, really thin. Wedge. Lots of heat loss. 10 heat loss, arbitrarily, I don't know. Let's say that building regulations need you to have a 5. Just for the sake of this video, you know. These aren't real. Don't quote these aren't real. This needs to be calculated in such a way that the average
5 and above
is 5 plus. And sometimes it doesn't work, because sometimes actually, if you imagine if you've got a small little infill extension, and you need this to be 5 degrees because of your roof finish, actually you might find that the averages don't work. But what I'm saying is you can't walk into Juices and buy that. It's a reasonably quick lead time, maybe 2 weeks, but you need to ring Bowder, give them the dimensions, calculate the U values, get it manufactured, get it delivered to site. So there is a way, but it takes thinking, which is why you get a lot of flat roofs that are warm decks, because actually what they do, and very kind of sweeping statement here, but what they do is they walk into Juice's and say, what insulation you got? Oh yeah, I need to do a flat roof today. And that's where they pick up that's why it's almost become commonplace, because you don't have to, you build the structure and then you sort the insulation out afterwards. With the cold roof, it's just a bit more thinking, etc., etc. Any more questions on flat roofs?
Do you think, in terms of roofing, figuring out the insulation is probably one of the key parts of it?
Yes, I would say, and this is the problem when you've got architects, when you've got a project plan or somebody that's unknowledgeable running the project that says, oh, don't worry, all you need is the planning drawings, like I drew, doors, kitchen layout, planning drawings, and then the structural engineer's drawings, which calculates the beams. Yeah? Who then calculates this?
So that's left to the builder to just make that decision, yeah.
And actually, what the builder then doesn't realise is they've got design responsibility. Now, if they've got design responsibility, they then have to sign the building control certificate at the end that says not only are they builder, but they've also designed it and they're competent to do so. Now, if that extension ever catches on fire, for whatever reason, they're going to go back to the building control certificate, especially if somebody dies. They're going to go back to the building control certificate and say, oh, it's new extension. Who signed this? Oh, the employer signed it. He's moved on. Oh, and the builder, the builder signed the design and the construction. Which then all of a sudden makes it really easy liability. Hold on, this has caught fire because you've stuffed a load of newspaper in here rather than you said that was okay. And actually, the problem is if somebody then dies, is that it's a prison sentence, manslaughter. So it's okay doing the design, it's okay doing the structure, but you can imagine just as a flat roof, warm roof scenario, you've got a crunched down ceiling height, you've got planning issues on kind of overall height, you've got a bit of thinking here, or you've got a bit of thinking on the ventilation. There are hybrid systems where you can lock it in, and one of our good friends has designed one, but the risk is high because in terms of construction, because if you've got a strange hybrid system, which absolutely is great if it's installed without getting any water contained in it, because you end up with a situation where you're locking moisture in and actually creating condensation.
So what happens with a building control visit where there isn't detail on the drawing to give the builder guidance on what to build? Can they wing it and building control say that's not good enough?
Onus is on ultimately the onus on the client and the contractor, because they haven't spent the money to actually undertake any kind of detailed drawings. You can apply for building regs in two ways. One is on a notice, and the notice I think is really good for knocking down an internal wall or making some minor alterations internally that might be structural. Other than that, don't bother, because actually the risk is too high. We are a great advocate of fully designing something and then getting it priced in accordance with the builder, but that fully designed then goes through building control, and building control then say, actually, yes, we agree, your designer is competent and is designing in accordance with the regs. Now you have to remember that building control are no longer, they're there to check, they're like a examinator in an exam board, they're making sure you don't cheat. But it's down to the designer, whether that be the builder or the actual designer, to be competent to do that. I've had it recently with a friend of ours. They've gone through full building control approval for quite a complicated barn conversion. And building control, even though they've signed it off and said, yes, you've designed correctly in accordance with the regulations, actually have then changed their mind when it comes to building and say, well, hold on, that cladding needs to be X rather than what you've designed. Can you just double check? And they never say it needs to be this particular material. It just says, we're not sure if it's designed in accordance with this BS regulation, you need to go and check it. And actually kind of rubber stamped and caused a lot of ag to the designer and the contractor, even though they'd signed it off.
Yeah, it's been approved in the first place.
Even though it's been approved.
And that's with a proper design, that's with one of our best designers. Not a project we're dealing with, but one of our best designers came up against that. If somebody's spending 400 quid on a set of drawings, I would be concerned. Happy with flat roofs?
Yeah.